the Vikings who almost changed history. Imagine a world where America speaks a Scandinavian language, where Norse gods replaced Christianity, and where Viking longships, not Spanish galleons, shaped the New World. 500 years before Christopher Columbus set sail, a group of fearless Norse explorers had already reached North America. They built settlements, they encountered native peoples, and they had the chance to colonize an entire continent. But they failed. They abandoned their settlements and returned home, leaving America untouched for centuries. Yet, what if they hadn't given up? What if the Vikings had succeeded in colonizing the New World? How different would our modern world be today? This is the story of the greatest missed opportunity in history. Let's explore how the Vikings discovered America, why they left, and what could have happened if they had stayed the age of the Vikings, masters of the seas, to understand how the Vikings reached America. We must first understand who they were. The Viking Age lasted from roughly 793 AD to 1066 AD. During this time, Norse warriors and explorers from Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark became the most feared and skilled seafarers in the world. They weren't just raiders pillaging monasteries and coastal towns. They were traders, explorers, and settlers. They established kingdoms in England, Ireland, and France. They sailed down rivers deep into Russia, reaching Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire. They ventured into the unknown Atlantic, crossing vast stretches of open ocean with nothing but stars, wind and courage. The Vikings had a secret weapon. The longship, these sleek, fast vessels with shallow drafts, could navigate both deep oceans and shallow rivers. They were technological marvels, allowing the Vikings to strike anywhere and disappear before armies could respond. But the Vikings weren't just warriors. They were farmers looking for land. Their homelands in Scandinavia were mountainous, cold, and crowded. Arable land was scarce. So they looked west across the Atlantic for new territory. The westward expansion from Iceland to Greenland. In the late 9th century, Vikings began settling Iceland by 930 AD. Iceland had a thriving Norse population. It became a stepping stone to further exploration around 985 AD. Viking named Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland for murder. Instead of accepting his fate, he sailed west and discovered a massive island covered in ice. He named it Greenland, a marketing trick to attract settlers, despite the harsh name being ironic. Eric established settlements on Greenland's southern coast, Sørs, by the year 1000, around 5000. Norse people lived there, but Greenland was harsh. Resources were limited. The Vikings needed more. They needed timber, fertile land, and new opportunities, and so they looked even further west. Leif Erikson, the first European in America, around the year 1000 AD. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, heard stories from sailors about land sighted to the west. Some accounts say a merchant named Bjarni Herjolfsson had been blown off course and saw forested shores. Others say Leif simply decided to explore. Leif assembled a crew of 35 men and sailed west from Greenland. After several days, they reached land. It was North America. They first landed in a barren, rocky place. Leif called Helluland, meaning flat stone land. Likely Baffin Island, they continued south and found a forested region rich with trees. Leif named it Markland, meaning forest land, probably Labrador. Finally, they reached a place with mild climate, grassy meadows, and wild grapes or berries. Leif called it Vinland, meaning wineland or pasture land. This was Newfoundland, Canada. Leif and his crew built temporary shelters and spent the winter there. They encountered the native inhabitants, whom the Vikings called Skraelings, likely the indigenous peoples of the Beothuk or Mi'kmaq tribes. The Vikings returned to Greenland with stories of abundant resources. timber game, and fertile land. Vinland seemed like paradise, but this was only the beginning. The attempted settlement, Lands all meadows inspired by Leif's tales. Other Vikings attempted to establish permanent settlements around 1010 AD. Leif's brother Thorvald led an expedition to Vinland. Thorvald and his crew explored the coastline. But tensions arose with the Skrælings in a skirmish. Thorvald was killed by an arrow shot by a native warrior. His death was a grim warning. This land was not empty, and its people would fight back despite the dangers. Another expedition followed around 1010 to 1013 AD. Thorfinn Karlsefni, a wealthy Icelandic merchant, led a large colonization effort. He brought 160 men and women, livestock, and supplies. They established a settlement, likely at Lands all Meadows in Newfoundland, a site archaeologists discovered in 1960, proving the Vikings really did reach America. For a time, the settlement thrived. They traded with the Skrælings, exchanging cloth and milk for furs and pelts. But the relationship soured. Misunderstandings, cultural clashes, and competition for resources led to violence. The Skrælings vastly outnumbered the Vikings, and their hit-and-run tactics made life dangerous. After 3 years, Thorfinn and his people abandoned Vinland. The risks were too high, and Greenland, though harsh, was safer. Why did the Vikings fail to colonize America? Several factors doomed the Viking colonization of America. First, distance and isolation. Vinland was over 1,500 miles from Greenland, and even farther from Iceland and Norway. Supply lines were nearly impossible to maintain. The Vikings had no permanent infrastructure, no reinforcements, and no way to sustain a growing population. Second, hostile native populations. The indigenous peoples of North America were not passive. The Skrælings defended their land fiercely, and the Vikings' small numbers made them vulnerable. Unlike later European colonizers, the Vikings lacked gunpowder cannons and the overwhelming technological advantage that would come 500 years later. Third, lack of resources. While Vinland had timber and land, the Vikings needed more than that. They needed iron for tools and weapons, blacksmiths, trade networks, and a stable economy. Greenland barely survived on its own and couldn't support distant colonies. Fourth, climate change. The medieval warm period, which had allowed the Vikings to thrive in Greenland and explore further west, began to end by the 14th century. The climate cooled. The Little Ice Age made Greenland even harsher, and the Greenland settlements themselves eventually died out by 1500. The last Norse Greenlanders had vanished, leaving Vinland a distant, forgotten memory. The legacy forgotten for centuries. After the Viking Age ended, Europe forgot about Vinland. The Norse sagas, tales of Leif Erikson and Vinland, were passed down orally in Iceland. But most historians dismissed them as myths. It wasn't until 1960 that archaeologists Helge and Anne Stein Ingstad discovered the ruins of Lands all Meadows in Newfoundland. This proved the sagas were real. The Vikings had reached America 500 years before Columbus, but they didn't stay. They didn't colonize, and they didn't change history, or did they? What if the Vikings had succeeded? What if they had established permanent, thriving colonies in North America centuries before Columbus? Let's rewrite history. Now, what if the Vikings colonized America? Imagine it's the year 1010. I.D. Thorfinn Karlsefni's expedition to Vinland faces the same challenges: hostile Skrælings, harsh winters, and isolation. But this time, things go differently. Instead of abandoning the settlement, the Vikings adapt. They make peace with some native tribes. They establish trade, they dig in, and they survive. Within a generation, Vinland grows into a thriving Norse colony. By 1100 AD, thousands of Scandinavians have crossed the Atlantic. Vinland is no longer a distant outpost. It's a new Norway. And from there, history takes a radically different path. The Viking colonization succeeds. How it could have happened for the Vikings to successfully colonize America. Several key changes must occur. First, diplomacy with native peoples instead of fighting the Skraelings. The Vikings learned their languages, established trade, and formed alliances. Just as Vikings integrated into England and Russia, they could have done the same in North America. Intermarriage and cooperation could have created a hybrid Norse indigenous society. Second, reinforcements from Scandinavia. If word spreads that Vinland is rich in resources, timber, fish, and land. Norway, Sweden, and Denmark send more ships. Populations back home are growing, and the promise of free land attracts farmers, warriors, and craftsmen. Third, technological adaptation. The Vikings adopt indigenous technologies, canoes, survival techniques, and knowledge of local plants and animals. This allows them to thrive in the harsh North American environment. Fourth, a permanent infrastructure. Unlike temporary camps, the Vikings build stone houses, fortified settlements, churches, and trade ports. They establish farms, logging operations, and fishing fleets. Vinland becomes self-sufficient with these changes. The Viking colony not only survives, it expands the Norse expansion across North America by 1200 AD. Vinland is just the beginning. Norse explorers push south along the Atlantic coast. They establish settlements in what we would call New England, New York, and beyond. They encounter different indigenous nations. Some they fight, others they trade with the Vikings, reach the Great Lakes, discovering vast freshwater seas and rich hunting grounds. They sail down the St. Lawrence River, establishing trade routes deep into the continent by 1300 AD. Norse America stretches from Newfoundland to the Chesapeake Bay. The population swells to hundreds of thousands. A mix of Norse settlers and assimilated indigenous peoples. Old Norse evolves, mixing with native languages, creating a unique dialect. The Norse bring their gods, Odin, Thor, and Freya. But they also adopt native spiritual practices, creating a syncretic religion. Christianity, which had been spreading through Scandinavia, struggles to take hold. Hold in this new world, where the old gods still reign. The clash with other European powers. Columbus never happens in this timeline. By the time 1492 rolls around, Norse sailors have already mapped the entire Atlantic coast of North America. European nations, Spain, Portugal, England, and France, know about the New World because Viking traders have been bringing back furs, timber, and stories for centuries. But here's the twist. Instead of viewing America as an empty land, ripe for conquest, Europe sees it as occupied by a powerful Norse Viking civilization. Spain still wants gold and glory, but when Spanish ships arrive in the Caribbean in the early 1500s, they encounter not primitive tribes, but Norse outposts. Viking longships patrol the coasts. The Spanish try to establish colonies in Central and South America. But Norse America is a rival power. Skirmishes break out along the coast, England and France. Seeing opportunity, try to establish their own colonies, but they face fierce resistance from the Norse, who view the Atlantic coast as their territory. The colonization of America becomes a multi-power struggle. Not a one-sided European conquest, a different fate for Native Americans. One of the most significant consequences of Viking colonization is the fate of indigenous peoples in our timeline. European diseases, smallpox, measles, and influenza wiped out up to 90% of Native American populations in the 16th and 17th centuries. But in this alternate timeline, diseases spread earlier and more gradually, starting in the 11th century as Vikings and natives interact. Indigenous populations are exposed to Old World diseases over centuries, not decades. This allows for partial immunity to develop instead of catastrophic 90% die-offs. The mortality rate might be 30 to 50%, still devastating, but not apocalyptic. Additionally, because the Vikings integrate with native tribes through trade and intermarriage, a hybrid culture emerges. Norse indigenous societies, blend technologies, languages, and traditions rather than total conquest and genocide, as happened in our timeline. The relationship is more complex, more mutual. The result is that by the 1500s, Native American populations are larger, more organized, and more resistant to later European colonization. The Iroquois Algonquin and other nations are armed with iron weapons and have knowledge of European tactics. The Norse technological and cultural impact, how would Viking America develop? By the 1400s, Norse America has developed its own distinct civilization. They've adopted maize agriculture from indigenous peoples, allowing for larger populations. They've spread ironworking across the continent. Native American tribes now have access to metal tools and weapons, which changes warfare, agriculture, and trade. The Viking love of exploration continues. Norse sailors mapped the entire coastline of North and South America. They might even reach the Pacific coast centuries before Europeans. In our timeline, did they? They established trade routes with Mesoamerican civilizations, the Aztecs and Mayans, encountering Norse traders instead of Spanish conquistadors. Would face a very different challenge culturally. Norse America is a blend. Viking sagas are told alongside indigenous legends. The Thing. The Viking Democratic Assembly merges with indigenous council traditions, creating unique forms of governance. Architecturally, longhouses and mead halls coexist with indigenous structures. Cities grow, timber fortresses and stone structures dot the landscape. The impact on Europe, a different renaissance and age of exploration. The existence of a powerful Norse American civilization changes Europe dramatically. First, the Viking Age. Never truly ends in our timeline. The Viking Age ended around 1066 AD. But in this timeline, Scandinavia remains a dominant maritime power, fueled by American resources, timber furs, and eventually gold. Norway, Sweden, and Denmark become the wealthiest nations in Europe. Second, the Renaissance and Enlightenment are influenced by Norse America. European scholars hear tales of vast lands, democratic assemblies, and hybrid cultures. This challenges European assumptions about civilization and progress. Third, the Protestant Reformation might be affected if Norse America retains Old Norse paganism or a syncretic religion. The religious landscape of the 16th century is more complex. Martin Luther's Reformation in 1517 faces not just Catholic opposition, but also a thriving pagan Viking culture in the West. The Age of Exploration focuses elsewhere since the Atlantic is dominated by the Norse European powers. Spain, Portugal, and England focus on Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. The colonization of India, Southeast Asia, and Oceania happens faster and more intensely. The modern world under Norse America. What would today look like if the Vikings had successfully colonized America? The map of the world would be radically different politically. The eastern coast of North America, from Newfoundland to the Carolinas, might be part of a greater Scandinavian Union or a confederation of Norse indigenous nations. The official language could be a descendant of Old Norse, mixed with native languages instead of English, Spanish, and French. The dominant languages in the Americas might be Norse Algonquin, Norse Iroquoian, and other hybrid tongues. Culturally, the United States as we know it might not exist instead of the 13 British colonies. A patchwork of Norse, Spanish, French, and indigenous nations could define North America. The American Revolution might never happen, or it happens very differently, with Norse colonies seeking independence from Scandinavia. Economically, Scandinavia would be a global superpower. Norway. Sweden and Denmark, fueled by centuries of American resources, would rival or surpass Spain. Britain and France in wealth and influence technologically. The exchange of ideas between Europe, indigenous America, and Norse America could accelerate innovation. Native American agricultural practices, combined with European metallurgy, might lead to earlier industrial revolutions religiously. the world might be more religiously diverse. Norse paganism could have survived in America, creating a major non-Christian civilization in the Western Hemisphere. This could influence European religious tolerance or lead to even more religious conflict. Would it have been better or worse? A complex question. On one hand, Norse colonization could have been less genocidal than what actually happened in our timeline. European colonization led to the near-total destruction of indigenous cultures. Viking integration and gradual disease spread might have allowed more Native American societies to survive and adapt. On the other hand, the Vikings were still conquerors. They were raiders and warriors who valued strength and domination. A Norse America might still have been brutal, with indigenous peoples enslaved or subjugated. Additionally, earlier colonization means centuries more of exploitation, conflict, and suffering. The American continents would have been battlegrounds for even longer. Would technology have advanced faster or slower? It's hard to say. The blending of cultures could spur innovation, or constant warfare could delay progress. One thing is certain, the modern world would be unrecognizable. Conclusion. A missed opportunity or a blessing in disguise. If the Vikings had successfully colonized America, the entire course of human history would have changed. The Americas would have been settled centuries earlier by Norse explorers instead of Spanish conquistadors. Indigenous populations might have fared better, or perhaps just as poorly. Scandinavia would be a global superpower, and the cultural, linguistic, and political landscape of the modern world would be radically different, but history took a different path. The Vikings left. Vinland faded into legend, and Christopher Columbus got the credit 500 years later. Yet the question remains, what if those Norse settlers had stayed? What if Leif Erikson, not Columbus, had changed the world forever? Would we be speaking a Norse language today? Would the Americas be more Scandinavian than Anglo-Saxon? Would the world be better or just different? One thing is certain. The Vikings came so close to rewriting history, and if they had the world today, would be a place we wouldn't even recognize. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating alternate histories and the untold stories of the past.